The first time the aliens tried to speak our language, they stumbled. They had mastered the words for city, war, even love. But when they came across one word, they froze. Their voices trembled, their translators hummed with static, and the meaning slipped through their grasp. That word was night. It shouldn't have been difficult. Just a title, an old relic of human history, born in dusty castles and half-remembered stories. Yet somehow for them it was untranslatable. Their machines produced garbled tones, their mouths twisted in confusion, their eyes filled with something between awe and fear. At first people thought it was a glitch. The translators had errors before, some dialect too old, some slang too new. But this wasn't a mistake. This was something else. The aliens weren't just confused. They were unsettled. When asked what the problem was, their response was chilling. "This word," one of them said, its voice clicking like metal striking bone, "is not a word. It is something more." No one understood what that meant, not yet. But the way they looked at us when the word came up, like prey staring at fire, made it clear they knew something we didn't. That was the beginning. We had been invited to the gathering, a great convocation of species held in a star system older than Earth itself. Humanity was the newcomer. A young race stumbling into the cosmos with engines that barely scratched at the speed of light. The others had ruled the stars for millennia. They were vast, ancient, arrogant. And yet, when they welcomed us, they did not mock. They studied us. Quietly. Carefully. Their eyes lingered too long on our soldiers, on the veterans who stood straight even after wars had broken them. Their voices hushed when we spoke of history, of kings, of oaths, of battles fought not for gain but for honor. And every time the word night slipped into conversation, their translators went silent. One night, if you can call it that, in a place where the stars burned brighter than any sun, I sat with one of them, a creature of glass and light. Its form shifted with every breath, as if its body couldn't decide what shape to wear. It asked me of our stories, the ones from long ago. And I told it. I told it of men in armor who rode into impossible odds, not for themselves but for those who could not fight. I told it of vows sworn on battlefields, of blades lifted against the dark, of courage that lived on even when death was certain. And as I spoke, the alien trembled. Its form cracked, and for a moment I thought it might shatter. "You should not speak of them," it whispered. "Do not awaken what sleeps in that word." I laughed then, though the sound was hollow in my throat. "It's just history," I said. "Just stories." But it did not laugh. There are no just stories. Not with humans. Not with knights. It left me with that, slipping away like mist under sunlight. And though I tried to dismiss it, I couldn't shake the weight of its words. The next day, whispers ran through the gathering. Species who had never agreed on anything now spoke with one voice, hushed and wary. They had discovered what we had brought with us, hidden not in weapons or fleets but in a single word. A word that carried something more dangerous than steel or fire. A word they could not translate. And that was when the questions began. Not from us but from them. They demanded to know why we kept such things. Why we preserved the tales of knights. Why we honored them, centuries after the age of castles and swords had ended. We tried to explain. We spoke of honor, of duty, of sacrifice. But they shook their heads. "No," they said. "Those are fragments. Shadows. What is the whole?" And no one could answer. Because how do you explain a spirit? How do you give shape to something that is more than flesh and more than history? The word night was not a definition. It was a feeling. A fire. And they feared it. That fear grew each day. Some among them argued that humanity should be watched closely before that word spread. Others suggested exile, cutting Earth from the stars before the infection could take root. A few even whispered of war, though they cloaked it in careful terms. But not all of them feared. A handful were curious. They leaned closer when we spoke of knights. They asked for more stories. They studied our histories with the hunger of those who had lived too long without meaning. And that was when we realized something. It wasn't that they couldn't translate the word. It was that they had lost it. Long ago, before their empires stretched across the void, before their civilizations calcified into laws and treaties, maybe they had known what it meant. Maybe once they had champions who stood between the innocent and the dark. But that was gone now. Forgotten. Buried. We hadn't brought them something new. We had reminded them of something they once were. And reminders can be dangerous. Because in that vast gathering, with stars burning cold and ancient around us, one truth became clear. They were not afraid of the word itself. They were afraid of what it might awaken. That night I dreamed of knights. Not in shining armor, not in perfect stories. I dreamed of broken men and women, bloodied and beaten, yet still rising when all reason said to fall. I dreamed of banners torn in storms, of swords held steady against giants, of oaths whispered in the dark when no one was listening. I woke with the sound of it ringing in my mind, louder than the hum of engines, stronger than the silence of space. A word. A promise. And when I stepped into the hall the next day, I found the others waiting. The air was tense, heavy with decisions unspoken. The alien of glass and light stood among them, its form dim and trembling. It turned to me and spoke words that froze my blood. They will not let this continue. If you speak the word again, they will move against you. Against your people. Against Earth. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could speak, the lights dimmed, and the hall's great doors began to close. One by one, the voices of the gathering fell silent. And in that silence, I knew, whatever night meant to us, whatever fire it carried, it had already changed everything. Because the word they couldn't translate was no longer just ours. It was theirs too. And some of them would do anything to silence it. The hall closed around us with a sound like thunder pressed through steel. 100 alien voices hushed at once, their silence louder than screams. I felt every breath in my chest, each one too loud, too fragile. Across the chamber, the alien of glass and light stood rigid, its form flickering faintly as if the weight of the moment was too heavy even for its body. I could feel the eyes of the assembly on me, creatures with shapes I could barely describe, beings older than our entire species, and yet all of them focused on one thing. On me. On the human who had dared to speak a word that should not have been spoken. No one told me to speak again. No one needed to. The word already hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. A voice finally shattered the silence. It came from one of the towering reptilian beings, its scales black and gleaming like obsidian. Its voice was deep, vibrating through the chamber. "This is dangerous," it said. "The humans must explain what they mean. Now." I felt my throat tighten. Explain? How do you explain something that even we don't fully understand? Nights were stories. They were history, myth, memory. Yet the way these beings looked at us. You'd think we'd unearthed a weapon more dangerous than any fleet of ships. I tried to steady my voice. It's not what you think. Knights, they're people. Long ago they were sworn protectors. They weren't perfect, but they stood for something. For duty. For honor. For those who couldn't fight for themselves. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The word, honor, seemed to sting some of them, as though it was another lost fragment of a language they had once spoken. The glass and light creature stepped forward. Its tone was fragile, almost pleading. Do not reduce it to fragments. Do not give them shadows when they demand the fire. The reptilian's eyes narrowed. Then speak the fire, human. And for the first time I felt the weight of the word in my chest. I remembered the stories I had been told as a child, the kind told not by books, but by voices beside campfires, by parents who wanted their children to believe in something greater than themselves. I remembered how those stories felt, how they had pressed into my skin and stayed there, impossible to forget. But how do you pour that into words for beings who have forgotten what it means to feel it? I hesitated. And in that hesitation they saw weakness. A low hiss spread from one of the insectoid delegates, its mandibles clicking sharply. You see? They do not even understand what they carry. They wield it blindly. Dangerous. Too dangerous. Another voice joined in, higher pitched, like wind moving through a canyon. Humanity should not have been invited. They bring corruption. Memories that should stay buried. Whispers built, louder and sharper, until the entire chamber felt like a storm of voices. I wanted to shout above them to defend us, but I couldn't find the words. My hands clenched, nails digging into my palms. Then I heard another sound. Faint at first, but growing. A human voice, steady and low. It came from one of our soldiers, a veteran whose body bore scars deeper than any metal could carve. He spoke not to the assembly but to us, to his own people. He said only this: a night doesn't explain. A night shows. The words cut through me like a blade. He was right. Maybe that was why the aliens couldn't translate it. Because it wasn't meant to be explained. It was meant to be lived. But how could I live it here, surrounded by beings who would see any action as threat? The chamber doors opened again, not by choice but by command. A new figure entered. Tall, cloaked in shadows that clung too tightly, as though light itself recoiled from them. The whispers fell away instantly. Whoever this was, the others feared them more than they feared the word. The cloaked figure's voice was colder than the void. Enough. The assembly obeyed. It moved toward us, each step deliberate. Humans, you carry something you do not understand. This word, this night, it is not yours alone. It belongs to the void of memory, to the silence of forgotten empires. You speak it now and the echoes stir. I swallowed hard. What do you mean, echoes? Its head tilted. I could not see its face beneath the shadow, but I felt its gaze burn through me. Once, long before your kind looked at the stars, there were those who bore the mantle you speak of. They fought not for power, not for empire, but for a duty beyond reason. And for that they were feared more than armies. Whole civilizations broke upon them. And then, they were gone. The silence in the chamber deepened. Every alien listened as if the figure's words unlocked something ancient in their blood. It leaned closer. If your kind has remembered what the rest of us have forgotten, then you have awakened something that should have stayed buried. I felt the truth of it sink into me. Not just fear but weight. Responsibility. We had carried the word lightly, as story, as myth. But for them it was a wound. The reptilian's voice rumbled again. Then destroy the humans before the fire spreads. The glass and light creature flared, its voice breaking. No. To destroy them would be to destroy what we lost. They must be studied, yes, but not silenced. Not yet. Arguments broke out again, fierce and bitter, but I barely heard them. My thoughts were spinning, unraveling. The word night had followed me my whole life, a story passed down, a spark. But here in this place, it had become something else. A key. A threat. A reminder of something older than Earth itself. I thought of the soldier's words. A night doesn't explain. A night shows. But what did that mean here, in this chamber where even words could ignite wars? That night I couldn't sleep. The stars outside the station burned too brightly, as if watching. Every sound felt dangerous. Every silence worse. I sat alone in my quarters, thinking of all the times I had spoken the word without weight. To children, to friends, to myself. And now, every memory felt heavier. A soft knock broke the silence. I opened the door and found the glass and light creature waiting. Its body flickered faintly, dimmer than before. You don't understand what you are carrying, it said quietly. I wanted to be angry, to tell it that we weren't children fumbling with matches. But I couldn't. Because maybe we were. Then help me understand, I said. Its form wavered. The word you speak is not just a word. It is a memory. A memory that clings to the marrow of species, shaping them long after the ones who bore it are gone. Once there were many who carried it. But they burned themselves out, one by one. We thought the memory would fade. We wanted it to. But now, his voice faltered like static. Now you bring it back. And if it takes root again, the galaxy will not stay as it is. Some will rise to it. Others will break. The fear in its tone was real. Not fear of humans, but fear of change. I didn't know what to say. The silence stretched until the creature turned away. Before it left, it whispered one last thing. When the word spreads, it will demand more than stories. It will demand blood. Then it was gone. I stood there, staring into the shadows it left behind, and felt the chill of truth creep down my spine. The word wasn't just history. It wasn't just human. It was something larger. Something that refused to die. And now the galaxy knew we carried it. The next day the assembly fractured. Some species demanded action against us. Others argued for patience. None could ignore the word anymore. Everywhere I walked, I felt their eyes on me, watching, weighing, deciding. I remembered the soldier's voice, steady and certain. A night doesn't explain. A night shows. But I wondered, when the moment came, when the word demanded more than stories, would we be ready to show them? Because deep down I already knew one thing. The real battle hadn't begun yet. And when it did, it wouldn't be fought with fleets or weapons. It would be fought with a word they could not translate. The air in the chamber felt thinner every day. Not because of the station systems, they worked with cold, perfect precision, but because of the way the assembly's voices twisted around us. It was no longer discussion. It was war waged with words before the fleets were summoned. Everywhere I went, the whispers followed. Human. The word. Night. Some spoke with curiosity, with a hunger in their tone, as though they longed for something they had forgotten. Others spoke with venom, as if even the sound of us breathing was a threat. The soldier stayed close to me. His presence was quiet but heavy. When he looked at the other species, it wasn't with fear. It was with the kind of gaze that had already seen war and didn't need to imagine it. And when the murmurs grew too sharp, too threatening, he would murmur the same line under his breath. A night doesn't explain. A night shows. That line haunted me more than the whispers. Because I knew the moment was coming when explanation would no longer be enough. And the galaxy was already bracing for it. The cloaked figure returned more often. It never spoke to the humans directly, never made demands. but its shadow carried weight. Wherever it stood, silence followed. The others feared it in ways I couldn't understand. And sometimes, when its gaze settled on me, I felt like it saw more than just a human body. Like it was measuring me against some invisible scale. One night, I think it was night, the stars never changed outside the station. I woke with a start. The soldier was standing near the door, blade in hand. Not a plasma rifle, not advanced tech. Just steel, simple and sharp. I asked him why he carried it. He didn't answer at first. He only stared at the blade the way a man might look at a scar. Then he said, "Because sometimes, to remind yourself of who you are, you need to hold something that has weight." That answer stuck with me. Because that was what the word felt like now. Weight. A story too heavy to carry, but one we couldn't put down. The assembly began to splinter. Some species had already withdrawn, pulling their delegates away before they were forced to take sides. Others doubled down, calling for human containment, exile, destruction. The reptilian war leader was the loudest, his voice echoing through the chambers like drums of battle. "They will bring fire to the stars," he said. "Do you not feel it? They will tear apart what we have built. We cannot let them speak again." The glass and light being stood against him, though its voice trembled. "And what if their fire is what we have lost? What if it is what we need?" The room shook with their clash. Not weapons, not yet, but the sound of civilization straining at the edge. And all the while, the cloaked figure watched in silence. The soldier leaned to me once, whispering, "They're not deciding if they'll fight. They're deciding when." That truth gnawed at me. I could feel it, the inevitability of it, like a storm building at the horizon. Every word we spoke only pulled the tension tighter. Every silence stretched it thinner. Then came the test. It was the reptilian's doing. He demanded proof, demanded that humans reveal the truth of the word, or be judged as deceivers. His voice rolled like thunder, daring us to stand or fall. The assembly agreed. A stage was set in the central chamber, vast and open, under the gaze of every species present. They called it demonstration, but I knew what it was. A trial. The soldier stepped forward before I could. He laid the steel blade on the floor, its weight ringing against the alien metal. Then he looked at me, his eyes steady. "Words won't work here," he said. "You feel it too. This is the moment." My chest tightened. I didn't know what he meant to do, only that it felt like we were standing on the edge of something that could not be undone. The reptilian war leader stepped into the arena, his body towering, scales gleaming. He looked down at the soldier with contempt. "Show us," he hissed. "Show us what this word means. Or admit it is nothing but smoke." The silence in the chamber was unbearable. 1,000 eyes burned on us. The soldier bent, picked up the blade and turned it in his hand. His movements were slow, deliberate, heavy with meaning. And then, without warning, he stepped forward. Not to strike but to kneel. The sound of his knee hitting the floor echoed. He lowered the blade, offering it not as a weapon but as a pledge. His head bowed. His voice carried, clear and unwavering. "I'm no king. I seek no throne. I stand for those who cannot stand, I rise for those who cannot rise. I am a knight." The word fell like thunder. The translators failed, of course. They always did. But the meaning did not need them. The chamber shuddered with something more than sound, something older than language. Some of the aliens flinched as if struck. Others leaned forward, trembling. The reptilian snarled, his voice cracking. "This is performance. Trickery. Do not be fooled." But his words were hollow. Because everyone had felt it. That moment, that weight, it had cut through them. And the cloaked figure finally moved. Slowly it stepped down into the chamber. Its shadow stretched long across the floor, reaching the soldier like a hand. "Enough," it said again, but this time its voice trembled with something not even it could hide. "You dare awaken what sleeps." The soldier did not rise. He remained kneeling, blade pressed against the floor, head bowed. And I realized what he was doing. He wasn't showing strength. He was showing surrender. Not to the assembly, not to power, but to duty, to the word itself. He was showing what a knight truly meant. The chamber erupted. Some shouted in awe, others in terror. The factions hardened instantly. The reptilian roared for war, his voice shaking the walls. Others begged for patience, for study, for restraint. The lines were drawn, sharper than ever before. And through it all, the cloaked figure stared at us. Not at the soldier but at me. Its voice lowered, almost a whisper, but I felt it in my bones. "You don't understand what you've begun. When the word spreads, it will not stop. It will burn. It will break. And it will demand everything from you. The soldier finally rose, blade in hand, his eyes meeting mine. And in that moment, as the assembly fractured into chaos around us, I knew we were standing at the edge of something far greater than ourselves. The word they couldn't translate was no longer a secret. It was a spark. And the fire it would ignite was only beginning. The chamber shook with noise as the assembly collapsed into chaos. Voices overlapped, some calling for war, others for restraint, and a few whispering with hunger as if they had just tasted something they had forgotten. The word night had done more than divide them, it had cut into the heart of everything they thought they knew about humanity. And it wasn't finished. The soldier stood tall now, blade at his side, his shoulders squared against the storm. His eyes burned with quiet certainty, but I felt the weight of the moment crushing me. This was bigger than him, bigger than any of us. We had carried a word across the stars, and now the galaxy was bleeding around it. The cloaked figure had not moved. Its presence froze the chaos, a silent reminder that the gathering wasn't ours to control. It raised its hand, and the chamber dimmed as though the stars themselves had hidden behind its will. "You think this is a spark," it said, voice low and steady. "But fire does not only light, it consumes. You carry human honor like a torch, but torches burn the hands that hold them." Its words echoed, and in the silence that followed, I saw something shift. Not in the figure but in the crowd. A handful of species, ones that had stayed silent until now, stood. Their voices carried not fear but defiance. "We remember," one of them said. It was a fragile, winged creature, its skin thin as paper, its body trembling. "Long ago, before we bent to empires and treaties, we too had those who rose for more than power. We had our nights. We buried them, but they were ours." Others stirred, murmurs rising, memories surfacing like ghosts. The reptilian war leader roared to silence them, but the silence did not last. The word had already spread. And then came the twist I never expected. The cloaked figure turned, not to us but to the assembly. Its voice hardened. "You think the humans bring this? But no, it was never gone. It has waited. It has slept in you all. The humans did not awaken it, they reminded you. And now, none of you will be able to silence it." The chamber froze. Because for the first time, the fear was not directed only at humanity. It was turned inward, toward themselves. The reptilian bellowed with rage, claws raking the stone floor. "Lies. Manipulation. This is their trick. Their weapon. Human honor is poison. It must be destroyed at the root." But the winged creature cried out again. "No. It is not poison. It is what we lost. It is what we need." And suddenly, sides were not simply drawn between humanity and the galaxy, they were fracturing inside every species. The word was not ours anymore. It belonged to them too, and it was tearing them apart from within. The soldier leaned close to me, his voice grim. "Do you see? This isn't about us anymore. The fire's out of our hands." He was right, but his words didn't ease the dread inside me. Because fires don't care who lights them. Fires spread until nothing is left but ash. The cloaked figure's gaze fell on me once more. "You will be the measure," it said. "Not the soldier, not the blade. You." I felt my stomach twist. Why me? I wasn't a warrior, not a leader. I was only someone who had spoken the word when asked. But maybe that was why. Because knights weren't kings or conquerors. They were people who chose even when the choice cost everything. The assembly surged again, voices breaking, threats spilling into the air. Some races called for immediate exile of humans, demanding fleets be sent to Earth. Others begged to carry the word home to awaken their own lost knights. The reptilian slammed his fist into the chamber floor, cracking stone. "Enough words. If they wish to show us human honor, then let them prove it in blood. Let them stand not in stories but in battle." The challenge hung heavy. And for the first time I saw true hunger in the eyes of the assembly, not for war against us but for spectacle. For proof. The soldier's jaw tightened. He didn't look at me this time. He didn't need to. I already knew what he was thinking. A knight doesn't explain. A knight shows. But before he could answer, the cloaked figure stepped forward again, its shadow stretching over us like a shroud. "Careful," it warned. "Once the blood is spilled, there is no returning. What sleeps will rise, and it will not obey your empires. It will not obey anything." The reptilian snarled, his voice trembling with fury. "Then let it rise. Better to face it now than let it spread." The chamber erupted into chaos again. Some shouted for restraint, others for blood, and the word night echoed between them like a drumbeat. The glass and light being trembled so violently it nearly shattered. It turned to me, its flickering form pleading. "You must choose," it said. If you show them human honor now, it will spread beyond control. It will tear through every world, every empire. But if you refuse, they will turn on you. On Earth. On your people. My heart hammered. There was no safe path. No quiet retreat. We had already lit the fire. Now it was either smother it with blood or let it consume the galaxy. The soldier placed his hand on my shoulder, steady and unshaking. This is why the word survived. Not for safety. Not for silence. For this. For the choice no one else will make. The chamber grew darker, the lights above dimming, shadows stretching. The cloaked figure's voice rolled like thunder. Choose human. Choose whether you will kneel or whether you will rise. The galaxy is watching. And once you move, there is no return. Every eye burned on me. The reptilian's breath hissed like fire, the winged creature's wings quivered in hope, the glass and light being shook with dread. Even the silent figure's shadow waited, patient but merciless. And in that moment I understood. This wasn't about the soldier kneeling or the stories of Earth, or even the fire we had carried. This was about the one thing the galaxy had forgotten and humanity still held. The one thing they couldn't translate. Choice. Human honor was never about being flawless. It was about rising anyway. And the galaxy was demanding to see it. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. My chest felt too tight, my hands shaking. Then the soldier whispered the word again, steady, grounding me. Night. It was enough. The chamber fell silent as I stepped forward. And that was when everything broke. Because before I could speak, before I could choose, the station itself shuddered. A deep rumble rolled through the walls, alarms shrieking in alien tones. The lights flared, then died. The floor shook as though something vast and ancient had awoken beneath us. And in the pitch-dark silence, a voice spoke, not human, not alien, but something older than both. You have spoken the word, it said, echoing through the walls, the air, the bones in my chest. And now you will remember. The chamber gasped as one. The cloaked figure's shadow flared and faltered. The soldier gripped his blade, eyes burning in the dark. And I knew then, the real trial hadn't even begun. The fire we had feared wasn't coming from us. It was already here. The voice that filled the chamber was like nothing I had ever heard before. It wasn't sound, not really. It was deeper, pressing against the marrow of my bones, vibrating in the air as though the walls themselves were speaking. Every creature froze, every translator shattered into static. You have spoken the word, it said again, slow and steady, each syllable heavy as stone. And now you will remember. The floor trembled. Light poured from cracks in the walls, not harsh, not mechanical, but ancient, golden, alive. The assembly fell silent, their fear no longer aimed at humans but at whatever force had awakened here. Even the cloaked figure, who had seemed untouchable until now, faltered. Its shadow wavered like smoke caught in a storm. The soldier gripped his blade, standing ready, though his eyes burned with the same shock the rest of us felt. Then it came visions. Not just to me but to everyone. They surged like a tide, crashing into us, dragging us into memories that weren't ours. We saw battles fought in endless fields beneath alien suns. We saw warriors in armor, some human, some not, all bearing the same weight. They rose again and again, beaten, broken, but unyielding. They stood not for empires, not for themselves, but for those who could not stand. They were knights, not of Earth alone, but of countless worlds long forgotten. The word wasn't human. It was older than us. Humanity had carried it forward when others let it die, but it belonged to something larger, something universal. The assembly cried out, some with awe, others with horror. Their memories stirred, old truths long buried surfacing like fire through ice. The reptilian leader roared, clutching his head, his voice ragged with fury. No. We destroyed this. We buried it. It cannot return. But it had. The voice boomed again. Honor does not die. Courage does not fade. The word lives where hearts choose it. The golden light swelled, filling the chamber, spilling into the stars beyond. For a moment I felt its weight in me, not crushing but steadying. A warmth in the chest. A fire in the bones. It was human honor, but it was more. It was the spirit of every being who had ever chosen to rise when all reason said to fall. The soldier stepped forward, his voice steady. This is it. This is what they feared. Not the word itself, but the choice it forces. The choice to live with honor, no matter the cost. The reptilian lunged, claws raised, eyes wild. But the soldier didn't flinch. He lifted his blade, not to strike but to hold steady, a shield between us and the chaos. And when the reptilian's blow fell, the golden light flared, stopping it cold. The chamber shook. The reptilian staggered back, hissing with pain and rage. And I understood, the word was not just sound. It was a force, a fire that shielded those who bore it with truth. The cloaked figure finally moved, its shadow twisting violently as though trying to smother the light. "You fools," it hissed, its voice no longer calm but ragged. "Do you not see? This fire cannot be controlled. It will not obey. It will tear the galaxy apart." The soldier turned his gaze on it. "Maybe. But it's better than silence." The figure's shadow lashed out, striking like a storm. Darkness and light collided in the chamber, sparks cascading like meteors. The sound was deafening, the force enough to throw some of the smaller beings to the ground. And then the twist came. The golden light bent, not against the shadow but around it. And in that moment we saw the truth. The cloaked figure was no alien at all. The shadows split, peeling away like torn cloth, and what stood beneath was a knight. Not human but something older. Its armor was broken, its form scarred, but the fire in its eyes was unmistakable. Gasps rippled through the chamber. It spoke, voice stripped of disguise. "We swore to end it. We swore never again. We buried the word so the galaxy would not burn. And now you bring it back." The soldier stared at it, blade still steady. "If you buried it, then you betrayed it. Knights don't hide. They stand." The ancient knight's voice cracked, pain threaded through every word. "We stood until nothing was left. We stood until our worlds turned to ash. You think you understand human honor, but you do not know the cost." The golden voice thundered through the chamber again, answering. "Honor without cost is not honor. Courage without sacrifice is not courage. The word lives and it will live again." The ancient knight roared, torn between despair and rage, its broken armor blazing with shadow. The soldier did not falter. He raised the blade high, and in that moment it burned, not with steel but with light. A sword not forged by hands but by choice. The two clashed. Light and shadow tore through the chamber, sparks like stars colliding. The assembly screamed, some fleeing, others frozen. I could only watch, my heart hammering as human honor met its own forgotten past. The battle was brutal but not long. The soldier's blade struck true, not to kill, but to shatter the shadow that clung to the ancient knight. The figure fell to its knees, the darkness peeling away, leaving only the broken warrior beneath. Its voice was quiet now, trembling. "We wanted peace. We wanted safety. But in killing the word we killed ourselves." The soldier lowered his blade, his breath heavy. "Then stand again. Not as shadow. As night." The chamber was silent. The assembly, for all their power and pride, said nothing. They could only watch as the ancient knight bowed its head, the fire returning faintly to its eyes. And then, slowly, one by one, others stood. The winged creature. The glass and light being. Even some who had shouted for our destruction. Their voices rose, not in unison, not in perfection, but in something raw and real. "We remember." The reptilian leader hissed, furious, but even his voice was drowned by the chorus. Human honor had spread. The word was no longer ours alone. It belonged to all of them now. The golden voice echoed one final time. "The fire is awake. Guard it well. For it will test you, break you, burn you. But it will make you more than you were." And then the light faded, leaving only silence and the stars. The soldier sheathed his blade, his face drawn but steady. He looked at me, and for the first time since this began he smiled, just faintly. "Now they know." I wanted to believe it was victory. That we had saved something that the fire would guide and not consume. But as the ancient knight rose, its broken armor gleaming faintly, it whispered to me alone. "You lit the fire. But fire spread. One day you may wish you had left it buried." That warning stayed with me as the assembly broke apart, as sides formed, as empires whispered and plotted. The word they could not translate had returned. It had united, divided, awakened. And in the quiet after the storm, I realized the twist of it all. The galaxy was not afraid of knights. It was afraid of becoming them again. The chamber felt different once the light was gone. The echo of it lingered, like warmth on the skin after a fire has burned low, but the brilliance had faded. What remained was silence, heavy, thoughtful, uneasy. The assembly had seen too much to return to what they were before. Every being in that hall carried the same mark now, the same memory of the word they had tried to bury. The soldier stood quietly, blade at his side. It looked ordinary again, just steel, but I knew the truth. It was never the metal that mattered. It was the choice behind it. He looked across the sea of faces, scaled, feathered, luminous, fragile, and though not all met his gaze, enough did. A spark had caught. The ancient knight, stripped of its shadows, leaned heavily on one knee. The golden fire no longer blazed through it, but there was a faint glow in its eyes, like embers refusing to die. "You've undone what we sealed," it said softly. "And now the galaxy will remember. Honor will demand a price. Are you ready for that burden?" The soldier nodded, though I could see the weight settle on his shoulders. "We've carried worse. We'll carry this too." For the first time, I realized what made humanity different. Not strength. Not cleverness. Not weapons. It was the willingness to carry burdens even when they weren't ours. That was the heart of human honor, the thing no translation could capture. The reptilian leader rose slowly, still trembling from the visions. His rage had cooled into something else, something closer to fear. "If this word spreads," he hissed, "everything we built will break. Alliances, laws, balance, all undone." The soldier met his eyes without flinching. "Maybe some things deserve to break." The assembly stirred at that. Whispers rippled through the chamber, some full of doubt, others with a strange new hope. The winged creature tilted its head, feathers catching the dim light, and murmured, "Perhaps we were wrong to fear the humans." The soldier turned away from the arguments, stepping closer to me. His voice was low, almost weary. "It's not over. This is only the beginning. You'll need to tell them, our people, our world. They have to know what happened here." I nodded, though the thought terrified me. How could I explain what we had seen? How could I put into words a thing that went beyond language? And yet, maybe that was the point. Maybe the word wasn't meant to be explained. It was meant to be lived. As the assembly dissolved into debate and denial, we left the chamber. The corridors of the station felt changed, though nothing had shifted physically. It was us who had changed. Each step felt heavier with the knowledge of what we carried. On the way to our ship, the ancient knight walked beside us, silent at first. Finally it spoke, its voice softer than before, no longer thunder but something more fragile. "When we chose to bury the word, we thought we were saving the galaxy. We thought honor was a fire too dangerous to hold. But perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps it was not the word that doomed us, but our fear of it." The soldier didn't answer. He only rested a hand briefly on the knight's shoulder, a gesture of understanding that crossed every species, every language. When we reached the dock, I paused to look back. Through the wide viewports, I could see the assembly hall shrinking behind us, but the memory of it burned in me. I wondered what those leaders would decide once we were gone. Would they embrace what they had seen? Or would they try again to bury it, to silence the fire? The soldier must have read my thoughts because he said, "It doesn't matter what they choose. The word is awake now. You can't unhear it. You can't unsee it. Even if they try to bury it again, it will surface. Somewhere, someone will remember." When our ship broke free of the station, the stars spread wide around us, endless and bright. For a long time none of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty, it was full, alive, charged with something none of us had words for. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning in me since the visions. "Do you think we're ready? Humanity, I mean. To carry this, to be what they call knights." The soldier looked out at the stars, his jaw set, his eyes distant. "No one's ever ready. That's the truth of it. But when the moment comes, when the choice stands before you, you either rise or you fall. That's what honor is. Not perfection. Just the choice to rise again." I sat with that, letting it sink deep. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the only one that felt real. The journey back to Earth was long, and in that time the words we had heard replayed in my mind. Honor does not die. Courage does not fade. The word lives where hearts choose it. I thought of those other beings in the hall, their faces lit by awe and fear, and I knew some of them would choose it too. That was how revolutions began, not with empires but with single hearts choosing differently. When at last our ship pierced the clouds and the blue curve of Earth came into view, something caught in my throat. It looked so small, so fragile against the blackness of space. And yet, this little world carried a word that had shaken the galaxy. A word no one else could translate, not because they lacked the language but because they had forgotten the spirit. Now they would remember. On the ground, as we stepped out under the sky, the soldier turned to me once more. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes carried the same steady fire I had seen in that chamber. "Tell the story," he said simply. "Not just with words. With how we live. With how we stand. That's the only way it survives." I promised I would. The days that followed were not quiet. Messages flooded from the stars, some demanding, some pleading, some threatening. The galaxy was awake and there was no going back. Some would try to twist the word, to use it for power, to make it something less than what it was. But others would rise. And that was enough. In the quiet of night, I often thought of the ancient knight, its broken voice trembling with regret. I wondered if we would end as they did, burned by the same fire we carried. But then I would remember the soldier's words, that honor isn't about winning or losing. It's about rising even when you fall. Maybe one day the word would fade again. Maybe one day the galaxy would bury it once more. But until then it lived. It lived in us, in every choice we made, in every moment we stood when it was easier to bow. And that, I realized, was the gift humanity had given, not a word but a reminder. That even in the vast silence of space, where stars burned and worlds turned cold, a single heart could choose to rise. The word they couldn't translate was night. But the meaning was human. And now, it belonged to the galaxy. And that's where the story ends. The word they couldn't translate wasn't just about humans, it was about choice, about standing when it's hardest to. If you felt that spark, carry it with you. Thank you for watching, and if you want more HFY stories about courage, mystery, and what makes us human, make sure you're here for the next one. Until then, stand tall.